At Genesis chapter 24. Nope, 25. We're going to look today, we're going to go back to the narrative. We did a few deep, a lot of practical stuff in the last 2 weeks with Deuteronomy, and so I wanted to come back for another story. I try to balance those out. Sometimes it's fun to just hear a story. But when we do stories, when we do narratives, I'm going to draw it at the end and have some applications, but you know your family, you know your circumstance. And listen, the Bible tells us you don't need anyone to teach you. You know that? In 1 John 3, I believe, it says, you don't need anyone to teach you, for you have the Spirit to teach you. This is John telling a group of brand new believers that you don't need anybody to teach you. And so as we read, as we do this narrative, I'm going to draw some applications, but the Holy Spirit's going to teach you. It's going to speak to you as we go. So pay attention to the details and say, Lord, speak. Because that's the beauty of the narrative. That's the beauty of story. C.S. Lewis once said, the beauty of stories and why he told stories, why he did things like the Chronicles of Narnia and not just mere Christianity. He said, why do you tell stories? Why did Jesus tell stories? Jesus' parables do exactly this. He says, because stories can steal past the watchful dragons. And in other words, they sneak up on us. We don't know we're this character. And we're all in and we think this is the protagonist or we think this is the hero and found out, nope, it wasn't the rabbi. It wasn't the priest. It was the Samaritan. Am I the Samaritan? Am I a good neighbor? The parables and the stories steal past. And so as we read this, and maybe you've read the story a bunch, and you think Isaac must be a great dad, right? And Rebecca, we read Rebecca's narrative in 24. Man, she is a woman after God's own heart. This is great. But then we get into the narrative, and don't let that fool you, because these are flawed individuals. There's not really any functional families in the Old Testament that we can pull from. They have their moments, but they're also full of failures and mistakes. And so as we read this, figure out, who am I? Am I one of these characters? Am I sometimes one of these characters? Am I all of these characters? And then let the Spirit convict you and find out, okay, how do I not be? And it comes from faithfulness to His Word. Spoiler alert. All right, so we have a long narrative, so we're not going to read it all. But I want to start in Genesis 25 because this is the beginning of the Jacob and Esau narrative, but that's what we're going to be looking at. And so verse 19 of chapter 25 in Genesis. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. Why didn't I start at 21? 21. And Isaac prayed to the Lord. This is where the story really should have started. What does Isaac do? Man, he starts off well. Isaac prayed to the Lord. For who? Not for himself. We're going to see Isaac's pretty selfish. But here Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. And the children struggled together within her. We're going to understand that in a minute. She said, if this is thus, why is this happening to me? And so she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided, and one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Okay, so the Lord has pronounced it already. What's going to happen? He's told her. If we learned anything at this point up in Genesis, up to this point, is just listen to God. When He says something's going to come true, it's going to. You don't have to help it, Abraham. You don't have to help it, Isaac. Just trust it. And when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau, which means red. Or Edom does, but I think Esau does as well. But that's important only because we're going to see they didn't name him after the Lord. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. And when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was, in our translations say a quiet man because it's a weird, strange word, but don't let that fool you. It's really more a domesticated man, meaning he was more of a mama's boy. He was in the tents. He was domesticated. And so this is not honoring Jacob here, that he was quiet or humble. So just don't miss that. He was a domesticated man dwelling in tents, which that explains what the quiet meant. He stayed inside. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, before we go on, I want you to notice a few things. We started really well. The Lord is mentioned in response 4 times in the very first 3 verses. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, whom he loved. And the Lord answered his prayer. God is at work, and when we ask, God answers. And so Rebekah conceived. And then when she was having these weird pains because she had twins, and who knows, she didn't know. So she went to the Lord, what's going on? And the Lord answered her. She spoke to the Lord, and the Lord answered her and gave her a promise. And then the Lord is nowhere to be found. And we're going to see that. That's going to be an interesting thing as we look through this passage. The name Yahweh only shows up one time, and we'll point out why. It has nothing to do with honoring Yahweh or obeying Yahweh. In fact, if you know anything about biblical names, how often is it the Lord has provided, the Lord has seen, his name shall be laughter for he has brought joy, but also sort of because God said, why did you laugh? But it always had to do with the Lord. And now suddenly, what does it have to do with? His appearance, his grasping. In fact, it takes God to rename Jacob Israel so that his name has something to do with God again. You see a parents who have strayed from their calling and strayed from the Lord who is their blessing. And that's why this really, as we look at it, Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Esau are a blessed family. The Bible is very clear that Abraham's descendants shall be blessed. And the only reason we know they're blessed is because the Bible tells us so, because they are cursed in every other way. Now, they're a blessing because the promise is going to go through them, but their life is awful. They live a cursed life because they don't live with the Lord. And that's going to be a picture that we see over and over. And then we get to the first hint. Actually, I think the names are the first hint. And then we get to another hint that, okay, things maybe aren't quite as good as those first few verses indicated. Because look at this. Isaac loved Esau. Man. And why did he love him? Because he ate of his game. I don't even know if he loved Esau. Isaac, and you're going to see this over and over, Isaac loved Isaac. In fact, before this, it says when he took Rebekah, she became his wife, and he loved her. And you think, okay, great. And it says, so Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. After reading the rest of this, I kind of go back and I wonder, did he really even love Rebekah, or did he just love the way Rebekah made him feel? Because he sure doesn't seem to nourish her or care for her. And the other thing I want you to notice is that word love. Some of you who are Bible scholars maybe know this, but love is not mentioned until the Abraham and Isaac story. Your son whom you love is the first time the word love is used in the Hebrew Old Testament. And it's Genesis 22. So we haven't even seen this word. And now suddenly Isaac loves Rebekah. Okay, that's good. But then we kind of start to rethink that. And he loved Esau because he ate of his game, and it says nothing about his other son. And in a few minutes, we're going to find out he loves that food. He's said to love the food, but he's never said to love his son. There's some major problems with this dad. But what about his wife? But Rebekah, she loved Jacob. But what about your other son? She didn't love. So we already see favoritism starting to creep in, or maybe full blown at this point. And so then we see the brothers. Brothers are now introduced. Once Jacob was cooking stew, and it's kind of just its own little story, and of course it matters for the whole history of how does he get the birthright, but it also gives us a quick picture of what is their relationship. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me have some of that red stew." And actually the Hebrew is just red. I think it's supposed to kind of get this alliteration that he's like a caveman. "Give me some red. I tired. I hunt." He's just kind of shown as this self-absorbed, has to live in the moment, has no thought for his purpose, has no thought for God's blessing on their life. Jacob, on the other hand, has a clear understanding of that, just not a holy one. I can take advantage of my caveman brother right here. In fact, you get the sense when it says, "I'll sell you my birthright right now." He says, "I'm exhausted." Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Like, you just thought of that? No, he'd been scheming. He's had this planned. He says, "Okay, maybe this is my opportunity." And Esau said, "I'm about to die. What use is a birthright to me?" You're not about to die. All right. You're just hungry. Go cook yourself some stew and keep your birthright. But no, he says, "What use is a birthright to me?" It's so petty. He seems like a petulant, like 3-year-old, right? Or 2-year-old. Like, "I'm about to die. What use is a birthright to me?" And so Esau cares only about his immediate experience, his flesh. And Jacob says, "Okay, swear to me now." And so he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. And then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. I don't even know if he gave him the meaty red stew that he asked for. Now he gives him beans. And he ate and he drank and he rose and he went away and he despised his birthright. I hate that birthright. It reminds me of how foolish I am. So then we're going to skip ahead. God continues to be faithful. Yahweh shows back up in 26, but we're not in the story of Jacob and Esau anymore. And then we come back, and we are reintroduced to their saga in verse 34 of 26. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. So what has Esau done? Esau does what Esau does. I'm hungry. I want stew. I don't care about the ramifications. I don't care about the consequences. I want it now. I'm hungry. I want a wife. Okay, I don't know what exactly he said, but he got to this point where he decided he wanted a wife. In fact, I'll take 2. It's not, he didn't have one wife and then later get married. He just got them both. That never happens. Even in polygamy, which was rampant in the Old Testament, it's this one and then another opportunity. Esau just takes what he wants at the moment and he doesn't think about the ramifications. Now, one more thought. How old was he? 40. When did Isaac get his wife? When he was 40. How did Isaac get his wife? Abraham, on his deathbed, said, "Before I die, I want my son to have a wife." And he sends his servant back to Canaan, or back to his homeland, so that he doesn't have a Canaanite wife, because Abraham does what fathers are supposed to do, which is get their sons' wives. And so even in Esau's haste and self-serving nature that doesn't care about what my parents are going to think, he clearly didn't get a blessing from his parents. They might have mentioned, "Well, we really don't want you having Hittite wives," but he just got it. But what did Isaac not do? Isaac didn't get him a wife. We're about to see a little bit more about Isaac, but don't miss that. This is Esau taking care of himself because the father is not fulfilling the role God has given him over and over. And so when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered, "Here I am." And he said, "Behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, Okay, what did Abraham do at the same moment? He went and got him a wife. He wanted the legacy to be taken care of, the promise, and his son. I'm about to die. Go and get your bow and kill something and bring it to me because I'm hungry. Behold, listen to how many first person pronouns show up in this text. In a time where he's supposed to be blessing and looking at the Lord. My son, here I am. That's Esau talking. He said, behold, I am old and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. And prepare for me delicious food, such as I love. And bring it to me that I may eat, and my soul may bless you before I die. Isaac is a father who is abusing his position, who says, God has made me the king, God has made me the father, so that you will do my bidding. And he's missed his role. As yes, you're the leader, and the way you lead, Jesus corrects us later in Ephesians. But this is not new. He should have known this in the Old Testament. You lead through sacrifice. Now, not the ultimate sacrifice. We learn that in the New Testament. Jesus says, just as I gave up my life for the church, you give up your life for the wife. That's what I'm calling us as Christians to. That's what Jesus is calling us to. But even so, look at Isaac. Compare him to Abraham and these others. Do for me. I'm hungry. Go get me the game that I love, the delicious food, which is only, that Hebrew word's only used one other time in Proverbs, and it's not positive. It's succulent, enticing, tempting, lustful food. Go get that food I love and bring it to me, and then I'll bless you. Which he's not supposed to bless him. Don't forget that either. The older will serve the younger. And so that's Isaac. That's who Isaac is. Let's move to Rebekah. Now Rebekah was listening, and when Isaac spoke to his son Esau, so when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord. Now, I'm going to stop there before I tell you what she said. What's Rebekah's role? If his role is to love the wife and to love the family as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, I know I'm getting in the future, but that's still his role. What's her role? To help. God has made her a helper fit for him, to help him get back into God's will, and to help him do what God has called him to do, which is to give the blessing to Jacob. What does she do? She doesn't help her husband at all. In fact, she does the opposite. She does what the curse says she'll do. She wants to rule. And so she says, therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. You don't get to do that. Command, this is the only time command is used in Genesis. Obey my voice. Who says that? That's a God thing. You go back and look at obey my voice, and I tracked it. I was like, where does this show up? Because it sure seems like obey my voice, Abraham. And in fact, in the blessing that Abraham got, this was interesting. He says, I'm going to give you this greater blessing in 22. He already promised him the blessing. But if you notice in Genesis 22, he increases the blessing. Everything is increased. The multitudes is increased. The nations is increased. The place they dwell. He adds some superlatives. And the reason is this, because you obeyed my voice. And so what's Rebekah now saying? Hey, listen to my voice. Don't think, don't consider morality, don't consider your responsibility, don't consider that I'm not the one that's supposed to be giving commands in this family. Just listen to my voice. She's usurping. And she's asking him to disobey all the authority that's in his life for her sake. Go obey my voice as I command you. Well, you don't have that right. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats. Now, does that mean we don't listen? No. And in fact, Abraham got in trouble for listening to the voice of his wife. I talked to you about that. And so did Adam. But in both cases, and this is the only time, men, we don't listen to our wives, is when they say something in direct opposite of what God tells us. Then we listen to God, and that's the only time anyone's ever been in trouble for listening to their wife, is when the wife said the exact opposite that God said right before. Otherwise, you better listen to him. But if God clearly speaks to you that we don't steal, we don't lie, and she says, hey, but this time let's steal and lie, say no. But beyond that, we listen, okay? And it's got to be a command from the Lord. You can't just say, well, I think God's calling us to do this. No, but these are very specific, direct commands. And she's saying, don't listen to that. Listen to me. So she's usurping her role. And you shall bring it to your father to eat so that he may bless you before he dies. We're going to steal that blessing. You don't have to. He's already getting it. But Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, behold. Now listen to Jacob's response. I love this. Jacob's the last one we haven't talked about. And I really think the narrator creates the order for such good reasons. Just read this slowly with me. So his mother just says, obey my voice as I command you, and go do these things, and we're going to steal your brother's blessing. And don't even read, just listen. But Jacob said, but. So there's this, no, this is wrong. I can't do this. But Jacob said to his mother, behold, my brother Esau, period. I wish there was a period there. And I think the narrator's setting this up. In fact, oftentimes, Jacob is meant to say his brother. The narrator keeps reminding him, these are twins. They're supposed to be close. And they're doing this to each other. And so if he had just said, but my brother Esau, this will crush him. Mom, what about my brother? But look what he says. But my brother Esau is a hairy man. It's just a complication. I don't care about his heart. I don't care about his soul. I don't care about his feelings. But he's hairy. How are we going to pull this off? And I'm a smooth man. And that's a double entendre, I believe. I'm a smooth man. He is a smooth talker. Perhaps my father will feel me. If we do it again, behold my brother, perhaps my father. But what about daddy? This will crush daddy. He's going to be so furious. But what about daddy? He might figure it out. And then think I'm mocking him. We can't mock daddy. We've got to honor father. But he's not really worried about mocking him either, is he? Because if I mock him, he might curse me. Who does Jacob care about? Jacob cares about Jacob. And bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing. Now, I can't do this because I can't risk it. It's not morality. It's not love. It's not God-fearing. It's just Jacob always wants to save his own skin. And so watch what happens. His mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and bring them to me. She says, obey my voice again. Notice that. And what does she say? Let your curse be on me. Jacob says, oh, well, in that case, okay. Do you see that? The one person he's supposed to love is his mom. And she says, son, I'll be cursed for you. And he doesn't say, no, mom, I could never let that happen. He says, oh, okay. As long as you're taking the curse, there's only upside. No, there's not upside. There's a ruined relationship with your father, a ruined relationship with your brother, a curse for your mother. But if those things don't matter to you, well, there's only upside. So who's culpable in this story? Have I given you the hero yet? None of them. It's a dysfunctional family, and every one of them is culpable. They all have their own issues. They all have their sins. And when did it start? It started when nobody regarded God anymore. Nobody regarded the Lord anymore. Nobody regarded the idea that we are a chosen race, a people that God called out for his own possession to bless the world. You're bigger than yourself, Isaac. You're bigger than that food. Esau, you're bigger than that red stew. And Jacob, you're bigger than grasping. Trust. Rebecca, you don't have to do this. Trust. Help. But nobody does. And we're one of those. Maybe we're all those. But I want you to see that because of this, they did not live a blessed life, even though they were people of blessing. And so now Jacob steps onto the scene. He said, okay, as long as you're going to take it. And I love this, that the narrator, again, gives us with verbs. Hebrew narrative will do this sometimes. Look at verse 14. As soon as he has all the responses, but this, but this, but this. And his mother says, the curse will be on me. So he went, he took, he brought. 3 consecutive verbs. No more thought. Don't have to worry. And his mom does the work. He went, he took, he brought to his mother. And his mother prepared delicious food, such as his father loved. You see the same thing in Genesis 3 when Eve takes the apple. Once she's decided, once she's convinced, she took, she ate, she gave. They like to do that with verbs. Once the decision's made, I'm not thinking about it anymore. Which also helps us understand we wrestle with temptation until we give in, and then at that point it's too late. You can't. I'm just going to take a little. I'll just try it. There is no try. And the Old Testament is very clear at that. Once you've decided I'm going to sin, you're all the way in. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her older brother, which were in her house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son, and the skins of young goats. So we'll skip kind of down, but she takes all this. She mentions the delicious food again. She gives him bread. She prepared it. So he went to his father. And finally, at least for Jacob's sake, he gets called his son one time. Only time Isaac ever calls Jacob his son, but he thought he was Esau. That's got to hurt. Here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to him, I am Esau, your firstborn. Notice also how often firstborn and older brother and younger brother come into play. It happens so much that as I read this, I got to the end and I remembered they're twins. They were born minutes apart. And yet the whole thing is about older, younger, separation. In fact, no more than 2 people ever show up in a scene together. There is so much separation in this family. Here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said, I'm Esau, your firstborn, and I have done as you told me. No, you haven't. You did as your mom told you. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. Even this is just all about me. Sit up, eat, so you can bless me. Like, get it on. But Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my lord? Because Yahweh, your God, granted me success. Oh, Yahweh is still around. They do know his name. When it helps you tell a lie, when it helps you smooth talk your dad, you remember that Yahweh is his God. I think that's irony that the narrator intentionally puts to show that they hadn't forgotten. They just don't care. Because the Lord your God granted me success. Blasphemer. Then Isaac said to Jacob, please come near that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you're really my son Esau or not. So Jacob went near to Isaac his father and felt him. And the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him and he said, are you really my son Esau? And he answered, I am. And then he said, bring it near to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Isaac got all the pleasures he wants in this world. One other thing I want to notice real quick before we move on to the blessing. Isaac is portrayed as one whose senses are just so dull and gone. And oftentimes in Old Testament, Eli, for instance, when Eli quit being a good prophet, when he was rejected, he couldn't see anymore, he couldn't hear well. Same thing's going on with Isaac. And what do we know about Isaac? He's on his deathbed, right? Well, how long does he live? He's 100 right here, right? Because his son was 40, we assume, and he was married at 40, and his wife had kids at 60 years later. Or no, I don't remember. I think it's 60 after he grows up to be 40. They had kids at 60, and then we know Esau's 40. So we think they're at least 100. Now, we don't know how long Esau got married between this and that, but they're around 100. Isaac lives to 180. We find that out in Genesis 35. And there's a whole lot of stuff that happens. Now, Rebekah dies at some point in between, but there's a whole lot of stuff that happens. And Isaac's still around. So what does that mean? Well, his life was basically over here. He was on his deathbed, but he got to lay on that deathbed for 80 years. Does that sound like a blessed life? No. He wasn't close to dead. He didn't have to do this so early. He rushed it. But it's an interesting thought that I had of just, this is the cursed life. Once he's rejected God, might as well die. You can't see, you can't enjoy, you can't even taste well enough to know venison versus lamb, and yet all you care about is food. It's like if someone who loves food and then COVID takes their taste, and it's like the worst thing in the world. What do I have to live for anymore? And that's Isaac for 80 years. They're a cursed family of blessing. And so then listen to this blessing. And we'll remind you later about the blessing Abraham had, and he actually blesses Jacob again later, and it's a good blessing. Listen to this blessing. And he thinks it's Esau, remember. He knows the rule. He knows that it's supposed to be the older because he mentions it, the exact same words God gives in this one. He's trying to reverse the blessing. He's trying to become God. And in fact, he thought he was God when he talked about that earlier. See, the smell of my son is the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. Only other time Lord is used, but I think that's an idiom, just the Lord is blessed, the field that the Lord has blessed. May God, he doesn't use the name, may God give you what? The dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and plenty of wine. This is not the blessing Abraham passed on. This is an Isaac blessing. Get a lot of food, a lot of wine, and then let the people serve you, and let nations bow down to you, and be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Are you kidding me? Your mother's son? This isn't a multiple marriages like some others. Like, that's your wife, and there's only one other son. You're talking about Jacob. Don't forget that. This isn't Jacob with the 12 sons from 6 different wives. This is just Rebekah, whom he's supposed to love. May your brothers and your mother's sons bow down to you, just like they've bowed down to me. And cursed be everyone who curses you. That is in some of the Abraham blessings, but it's always second. Bless first, and if others don't bless you, they are cursed. God curses them. But Isaac says, cursed to those who curse you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. This is a self-serving curse. They've forgotten its purpose. And as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau his brother showed up and said, I got some food for you, Dad. And he said, who are you? He says, I'm your son. And we repeat the whole thing. And then verse 34, as soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry. And he said to his father, bless me, even me, O father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. Is that true? We'll see. Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright. And behold, now he has taken away my blessing. Now let's go back. How is the father supposed to bless the sons? Together, especially twins. But in others, all the sons are there and he blesses each. Had Isaac done that, just think about this for a second. Had Isaac done that, he couldn't have been tricked. Whose fault is this? Yeah, Jacob is a conniver, and he is absolutely guilty and culpable. But so is Isaac. Had he not been trying to underhandedly take a blessing that God gave to Jacob and put it on Esau, and actually gave him the right blessing, he would have had plenty of blessing left for Esau. But he doesn't. He harmed himself, and what does he do? When he has a chance to say, I'm sorry, I tried to reverse the curse, and I have been caught by God. God controls all, and this is my fault, son. I'm sorry. No, what does he do? Your brother did it. The father blames the son, and he encourages the other son to hate and blame the son. He doesn't take any responsibility. Had you just blessed the twins together, this doesn't happen. Had you just blessed him the way God has told you to bless him and not said, may your brother's sons bow to you, you don't have to do all that. You used it all up because you thought it was Esau. And now you're caught. Instead, he encourages wrath and hatred from one brother to the other. And then he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Well, no, I could have, but I didn't. And Isaac answered and said to Esau, behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brothers I have given to him for servants. Yeah, that was a little too much. And with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then do I have to do for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, my father? Don't you have more? Bless me, even me also, O father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Esau's finally sad. Oh, sorry, that's still Esau. Isaac's still not sad. Then Isaac, his father, answered and said to him, behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. And by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching, and then I will kill my brother. Now, I want to stop for just a second and look at this blessing. And it is a blessing. You say, it sure looks like a curse. Here's why it's a blessing. The last verse. He says, yeah, I've already given him all that stuff, and I can't review it. In fact, he says, I've blessed him, and he will be blessed. Because if I know anything about the Lord, he keeps his word. He's going to be blessed. I gave him all that stuff. I didn't have to mention the negative, but I did. It's done. But look at this. And I bet Esau never knew that this was a blessing until later in his life. But he says, when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now, what does that mean? Does Esau end up winning? No. We know from history that can't be. It was Jacob's line that is the blessed line. Here's what it means. And this is why I know it, because the narrator gives us the very next yoke. He says, now Esau hated Jacob. And in the next verse, I will kill him. My life is about killing him. After I can bury my father, which takes 80 years, I'm going to kill that son. I'm going to kill him. Now, what's his yoke? Hatred and anger. And one day you'll be restless. You can't take it anymore. You can't take the hatred. You can't take the bitterness. You can't take living for vengeance yourself, because vengeance is the Lord's, and we can't carry that burden. That is a blessing to us, not a curse, that we don't get revenge. And one day, and we know it from the end of the story, one day Esau will realize that God is good. I don't know that for sure, but I think the way he responds to Jacob, it can't be anything except that he's experienced God's goodness and loves God now. That's just what I believe. But at some point, the hatred and the anger is gone. And what does Esau live? Esau lives a blessed life from that point forward. And you see it at the end of the story. He is blessed. I have more than enough. Everything I was worried about, it was foolish. I have more than enough. And what does Jacob do? Jacob bows to him. It's literally a reversal of this blessing, because the blessing is historical. But you live in blessing personally, yeah, the line's going to continue through Jacob's line, and Esau doesn't get that, but Esau the person, Esau the man, can live a blessed life as long as he lives for the Lord. And Jacob, who is the son of the blessing, what does he do the rest of his life? At least until he meets Jesus. And I believe he wrestled with Jesus. That's a whole other narrative. Until he meets Jesus, what does he do? Well, he does what he does the rest of this story. His mom finds out that Esau's going to kill him because she overheard. Man, that lady overhears everything, right? I think she's a snooper. She heard the words of Esau, which, who's Esau telling? That's the other thing. Like, I figured he was thinking this to himself, but apparently he's saying it enough that his mom heard it. And she says, "Therefore, my son, obey my voice." Boy, hadn't that got you in some trouble already. "Arise and flee to Laban, my brother in Haran, and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away." Just flee. And do you know what Jacob does the rest of his life until he wrestles with God finally in a place he can't get away? Otherwise, I think he would have fled again. He flees. He runs. He lives in fear. His yoke is fear of saving his own skin. And yeah, he's blessed, and God continues to bless him, and he gets more and more sheep and more servants and all these things, but it never changes. I got to move. I got to keep moving. They're coming for me. They're coming for me. And now I got to go back through Esau's land, and he's coming for me, and he's fearful, and he lives in fear until he finally gives it to the Lord. And we'll see the end of the story in just a moment. Both of the sons lived blessed lives once they finally turned to Jesus. The parents never do. Isaac lives on his deathbed for 80 years. We've already talked about that. And look at the curse. His mother was cursed. What was her curse? Well, she lost both sons in a day. In fact, she thought she was saving one, but she ended up losing him. It says, "Therefore, my son, obey my voice. Go to Haran and stay with Laban for a little while until your brother's fury turns and he forgets what you have done. Why should I be bereft of both of you in one day?" She speaks her own curse. That's what she ends up doing. She lost the son she loves. She's already lost the other son. I didn't know this. ESV usually does pretty good. That's why I like it, but they missed a few here. Some of yours might say for a few days. Does it say that in verse 44? That's the right translation. Mine says for a while. Well, a while is a while. But a few days gives you a much better understanding of what his mom thought she was doing. Just go stay for a few days, and he'll get over it. Which, again, about communication and about how they handle anger in this family. Just let him. Don't deal with it. Just run, and then come back in a few days. A few days became a few decades. She'll never see her son again, at least in the narrative. We don't know if he ever visited, but he's gone until she dies. She lost both of her sons in this day, and so when she said, "Let your curse be on me," it was. Isaac's cursed, Rebekah's cursed. The sons are cursed until they finally say, "We got to start living for the Lord again." It took God breaking one's hip, and we don't know what happened with Esau. But finally, God wrestled with both of them, and he broke both yokes. And suddenly, they live a wonderful life, at least for a chapter, and then Jacob kind of goes back to his old ways. But it's almost like happily ever after, because they finally turn to the Lord. Just to finish the story, Rebekah tells Isaac, send him off to get a wife. It's not really what she cares about, but she just has an excuse to get him to go to Laban. And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him not to take a wife from the Canaanite women. It would have been nice if you told your sons that before. You always knew it. And then he blesses him this way: God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessings of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham. Had he said that the first time, and he knew it, we don't see where God showed up and gave him a new blessing anywhere between that last chapter and this chapter. He'd have had plenty of blessing left for Esau. This is the blessing of Abraham. Go and take possession of the land I promised you. multiply so that you will be a blessing for others. And so Jacob goes. God blesses him. God wrestles with him. The Jacob saga is an awesome one, and I'm going to tell that someday, but it's not in our parenting time. But let's get to the end when Jacob meets Esau. Jacob's still scared. That's why he puts his whole his servants and then his wives and then his children, his favorite children last, in front of him. You notice that? That's an Isaac move. They got to kill all those people before they get to me, and I'll have time to run. He sacrifices them. But after he wrestles with God and God transforms his life, what does he do? He moves to the front. He goes first, and he actually cares about the kids too. He says, let's don't go very fast. The kids need a break. The camels need a break. I've been pushing them too hard. He's a changed man. So is Esau. And so we get to 33 when Jacob meets Esau. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided his children, and we know all this. But Esau, and now I think he's dividing them to save them, not to get a buffer, because he's still up front. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck. I love the narrator again. That could mean two different things. He fell on his neck. He landed that blow to his neck. He killed him. But no, we've reversed it, and now I'm going to kill him with love. He literally kills him with kindness. He landed a blow on his neck. It just happened to be from his own lips. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him. That could be wrestling. And fell on his neck. Okay, wait, what's going on? Are they fighting? No. He kissed him, and they wept. And when Esau lifted up his eyes and saw all the women and children, he says, who are these with you? Jacob said, the children whom God has graciously given me. And it hurts because I could have had time to get to know them, and we've wasted it by hating each other. And the servants drew near on their children, and Leah and her children, and he got to meet all his nieces and nephews. And Esau said, what do you mean by all this company that I met? And Jacob said, well, to find favor in your sight, my Lord. Who worships whom? But Esau said, I have had enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. Actually, turns out I don't need your blessing. God's enough. And Jacob said, no, I have enough too. Isn't this amazing? No, please, I found favor in your sight. Then accept my present from my hand, for I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. It's all God. Everything I grasped for didn't matter, but God has dealt graciously for me. And he urged him, and he took it, and then they journeyed on home. There's redemption in this story, but man, at what cost? For how long? And so as we look at this story, there's a million applications. I did most of them as we were going through, and I wanted to do that, but let's just look at, and we really won't have to do the next screen, but go ahead and show it. Oh yeah, go back to one. This is just funny. I don't know if y'all read the few comics I stuck in there. I didn't mention this. He's talking to somebody. Still ticked at Jacob for stealing your blessing? Yes, and then it finds out that my parents are displeased with my wife. He's like, I didn't even know. So what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go marry someone else, I guess. The part I skipped is when Esau, poor Esau, figures out his parents are upset about the Canaanite wives that he should have asked beforehand, but he didn't. He decides, I'll just go marry a daughter of Ishmael because that's my father's brother. And his father makes no mention of it. So now he's just got 3 wives, but his dad's still not proud of him or happy with him. So that's pretty rough on Esau there. Okay, go to the next. And so we talked about all of these, and so I won't rehash them. But the role for each of these is a little bit different, but their role is to be agents of blessing, to trust the promise, to understand that my life and my calling as an agent of blessing is bigger than me. And each of them failed to do that. Responsibility, we talked about the responsibility of the father is to lead by serving. He failed. The responsibility of the mother is to help and submit, and to trust the promises. When her husband is a bad leader, to trust God to handle it. She does the opposite. A bad son, his responsibility was to ask for a blessing from his parents, to care about the traditions, to care about these things. And then Jacob wasn't so much a bad son, but he was a terrible brother. And his responsibility was to Esau, and he didn't care about Esau. He stole from him. He took advantage of him. And in every case, it ruined relationships. We had bias and favoritism and complete carelessness about the Father God. He wasn't in this story. But go to the next. So how do we fix that? What are some ways, just looking at the text, to reconcile this or to remedy this? The Bible writes long stories, guys. It's not my fault, all right? But no, we'll run through this quick. If I can find my 5 things. So a couple of things, had they done this, I think we would have seen a blessed family. Intentionality. They were never intentional about loving both. They just did what came natural. Isaac loved to eat the food in the game, so he loved Esau. Jacob wasn't naturally in his life. He's got to find ways to put Jacob in his life. Rebekah the same for her other son. So just very practically, dads, are you having daddy-son time and daddy-daughter time? Separate, but individual. Moms, are you doing the same? I have plenty. Cameron and I could watch the Astros or watch baseball or talk baseball anytime. So I have to be intentional with Ellie about art or about dance. But I do it. The next thing, interception. And this is to cut off negativity and rivalry and bitterness when you see it. These parents actually encouraged it. Hey, did you see what your brother did? Did you hear what your father said? Instead of intercepting it and saying, is that the way you should treat your brother or your sister? And reminding them of that, as the narrator did. These are supposed to be our closest relationships. You two are twins. You love each other. Don't let this come between you. But that never happened. In fact, they fanned those flames. Individuality. And what I mean by here is there is blessings enough for both of you. You are both individually blessed. And one might be the son of the promise, the line, but there's plenty for others. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with that. We're all in the promise. Jesus didn't just die for one of your children. So we don't have to worry about that. But one of them may be a gifted athlete and the other a gifted singer. We've got to honor both of those. One might be super smart and the other not. But they have their own gifts, and find them and bless them. And don't just always let them hear you praise one and not the other. There is blessing enough for everyone. And we see that even in this story. Integration. Who's in the scene? All right. In this story, we saw it over and over and over. Who's in the scene? Jacob and Esau, Isaac and Esau, Jacob and Rebekah, Rebekah and Esau. I don't know if they were ever together, other than her overhearing him. Rebekah and Isaac. What are they doing as a family? It's not enough to just have that individuality, although we need it, as long as it's even. But what are they doing as a family? When are all 4 of them talking together? I only got to hear one side because I only listened to one side. But what did you think about that? Oh, this is what your brother heard, right? Or just go play together. I think it's important to say, no, we're having family time. I love that our kids have a bunch of friends in our neighborhood. But sometimes it just needs to be the 4 of us. We've got to learn to actually get along together. We don't always have to bring a friend. That's important. It's not easy. It might be easier to bring a friend. But sometimes we say, no, this is just our family. We're going to smile for the pictures and pretend like we're having fun until we learn how to do it. And then last, intercession. I don't think they ever prayed for their sons. They did everything else for them. They never prayed. Think about Rebecca. She should have prayed to the Lord. God, you know the promise. I heard what you said. My husband's going to try to do something different. You handle it. And Jacob says, I heard Dad's going to bless Esau. And Rebecca says, yeah, but God wins. We don't have to worry. We don't have to fight for that. Or go to Isaac. Honey, you know God wins. You try to do this and you're only going to hurt yourself. We don't get to change the fates, but the fates are for us in this case. So you better accept it. Are we interceding for one another before the Lord? Say, God, I can't stop them. I can't change them. I can't make my kids love each other. I need you to. Are we praying for them? Are we giving them to the Lord? So those are some ways we can not be like this family. But the final thing, and this is our response, are you tired of living in curse? There is a blessing for you. There is a blessed life for you, but it only comes by giving your life to Jesus and stop trying to do it yourself. Stop trying to get your own revenge. Stop trying to grab for yourself security or success or blessing and say, God, you're enough. Like Esau, I have plenty. Like Jacob, I'm tired of wrestling. I'm tired of fighting, God. If you're going to kill me, but I don't want to fight anymore. And instead, God blesses him and renames him. Quit fighting with God and with the fates and with your future and say, God, I'm all yours. I'm tired of fighting you. I trust you. I love you. And we can do that now. His name's Jesus. We don't get Yahweh anymore. Now we have a personal name and a Lord and Savior who came to this world to save us. His name's Jesus.